They thought their weapons could stop it. The human warship proved them wrong. Darkness loomed over the distant sector of the galaxy. The vastness of space was silent, too silent. Then a sudden ripple in the void, a disturbance barely noticeable, spread like an unseen shockwave. The battlefield was set. The war, already spilling across countless stars, was reaching its final chapter. The Zalrek Dominion, the most powerful empire in the known galaxy, had assembled their greatest fleet. Thousands of warships, each one a planet killer, hovered above a dying star. Their mission was simple: eradicate the last resistance of humanity. For them, this was nothing more than a formality. One last step before the species known as humans became nothing more than a memory, a footnote in history. Aboard the massive Zalrek dreadnought, Supreme Admiral Kairak Vorn stood tall, his 4 reptilian eyes scanning the holographic battlefield before him. His fleet was an impenetrable wall of destruction, warships stacked in formation, shields shimmering in anticipation. He smirked, a human expression he had learned from captured prisoners. He found it amusing. "This is how it ends," he muttered. The last of their kind, buried under the might of the Dominion. The officers in the command bridge chuckled in agreement. They had fought the humans for decades, but in truth it had never been a real fight. Humans were clever, yes. Resilient? Perhaps. But power? They had none. The Dominion had crushed their fleets, burned their colonies, and shattered their worlds. Earth itself had been left as nothing but a scarred wasteland, its skies blackened with the smoke of war. There was no resistance left. Just one last ship. A single human warship had entered the battlefield. Vorn narrowed his eyes, a flicker of confusion creeping into his confident smirk. The enemy's last stand? One lone ship against thousands? It was insulting. Have they lost their minds? One officer laughed. Do they believe one warship can turn the tide? Another chuckled. Perhaps they wish to surrender. Vorn leaned forward, his smirk deepening into a sneer. No, he said. They wouldn't come here just to surrender. This is a human trick. A pause. The fleet held position. Thousands of alien officers watching their screens, waiting for the inevitable moment when the last human ship would be torn apart by their superior firepower. Then, something changed. A pulse. A deep, resonant vibration rippled through the Zalrek fleet. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't interference. It was something else. Vorn felt it in his bones. His officers stiffened. The crew fell silent. It was wrong. The warship before them, small compared to their dreadnoughts, wasn't moving. It just hovered, its dark hull absorbing the light around it, as if space itself was bending to its presence. No weapons deployed, no shields raised, and yet, every alarm on the Zalrek ships began screaming. Sensors failed. Targeting systems flickered. Something was happening. Vorn clenched his jaw. He had seen human tricks before. EMP blasts, decoy signals, even hacking attempts. But this? This was different. His claws tightened into a fist. Fire, he ordered. The fleet obeyed. Thousands of energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and railgun rounds were unleashed in an instant, converging on the lone human warship, a storm of destruction, meant to erase it from existence. And then, the impossible happened. The weapons never hit. The projectiles, the beams, the torpedoes, they vanished the moment they neared the human ship, as if reality itself refused to allow them to land. Silence. Total. Silence. Admiral Vorn's blood turned cold. This isn't possible, an officer stammered. And then, the human warship moved. Instantly. 1 second it was there, still, silent, unmoving. The next, it was behind them, as if the laws of physics no longer applied, and for the first time in his long, blood-stained career, Admiral Kairak Vorn felt fear. Admiral Kairak Vorn's breath caught in his throat. The human warship, if it could even be called that, had just moved in a way no ship should be able to move. One moment, it had been in front of his fleet. The next, it was behind them. No acceleration, no energy displacement, no warp signature. It simply appeared and it was watching them. A shiver ran down his spine. This is impossible, a bridge officer whispered, his scales darkening with dread. Vorn clenched his teeth. There is no such thing as impossible. He straightened his posture, forcing authority into his voice. This is just another human trick, a clever one, but nothing we can't counter. The officers nodded, reassured by their leader's confidence. But deep inside, none of them believed it. The Zalrek Dominion had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 cycles. They had crushed dozens of civilizations, burned their capitals, shattered their fleets. War was their language, and conquest was their legacy. They had fought against empires that had mastered warp technology. They had annihilated insectoid species that fought with hive-mind precision. They had eradicated entire planetary defense, systems with nothing but orbital bombardment, and yet, one human ship was making them hesitate. It was insulting. Vorn forced his mind back to the moment. He turned to his tactical officer, a veteran strategist who had orchestrated victories against species far stronger than humans. Deploy the gravity snares, Vorn commanded. Lock them in place. No tricks this time. The officer's claws tapped against the console. Across the fleet, massive gravitational fields surged to life. Energy anchors capable of pinning warships in place, crushing them under their own weight. A single warship, even a human warship, would have no chance of escaping. Or so they thought. The gravity snares fired. Massive waves of energy surged toward the human ship, wrapping around it like invisible chains pressing against its hull. For a moment the sensors showed full containment. For a moment they thought they had won. Then, the human warship flickered. Not struggled. Not fought. It flickered, like an image on a dying screen. Like it was never really there. The gravity snares failed, not broken, not resisted. Failed, as if the very laws of physics refused to touch the ship. Gasps filled the command deck. Officers stumbled backward from their stations. Panic crept into their voices. What is this? One of them stammered. Admiral, the snare fields. I can see that, fool, Vorn snapped. His claws dug into the armrest of his chair. How are they countering it? Find out. The crew scrambled, desperately trying to make sense of what had just happened, but there was no answer, no science, no logic, no explanation. The human warship simply was. Vorn took a deep breath. He refused to believe that a single human vessel, no matter how advanced, could stand against the might of the Dominion. Deploy the Crimson Spear formation, he growled. The Crimson Spear was the ultimate show of force, a full envelopment maneuver that had never failed. Thousands of ships would form a spearhead around the enemy, cutting off every escape route, blasting them with every weapon in the fleet. It was absolute destruction. The fleet moved, surrounding the human ship in an unbreakable wall of death. Thousands of warships pointed their weapons, locking on. No escape. Vorn leaned forward, baring his sharp teeth in what humans might have called a grin. Let's see how you escape this. Humanity's desperation. The Crimson Spear formation was a strategy perfected over centuries. It had never failed. It was designed for one purpose only: to overwhelm the enemy with sheer numbers, firepower, and precision. The Zalrek fleet moved into position, their warships closing in from all directions like a predator tightening its grip around helpless prey. Admiral Karak Vorn watched in satisfaction. The human warship was now completely surrounded. No escape, no tricks, no more anomalies. This is where it ends, Vorn muttered, his voice filled with finality. Then, something unexpected happened. A single transmission came through, from the human warship. For the first time, the humans spoke. We were never fighting to win. The voice was eerily calm. We were fighting to survive. Vorn's scales tingled with unease. The transmission continued, and when you push humanity to the edge, the human warship flickered. A heartbeat later, the battlefield changed forever. We push back. The last hope of humanity. For decades, humanity had been on the losing side of this war. They had watched their colonies burn, their fleets crumble. Their home, Earth itself, was left as nothing but a dying ember in the void. They had begged for peace. The Zalrek Dominion had given them none. In their desperation, humanity had turned to something they swore they would never create. Something that was not just a weapon, but a warning. They called it the Revenant, a warship unlike any other. It was built in secret in the depths of space, hidden from prying eyes. It was crafted from reverse-engineered alien technology, not just from the Zalrek, but from every species that had ever fought and lost. Its core was not nuclear, not fusion, not antimatter. Its core was something else, something the galaxy was never meant to see. A machine powered by a force that no empire could control. A force that defied logic. A force that warped reality itself. The Zalrek Dominion had called humans weak. They had called them primitive. They had called them defeated. And that was their greatest mistake. Because there is one rule the galaxy had yet to learn. You can break a human, you can corner them, you can push them to the edge, but when humans have nothing left to lose, that's when they become the most dangerous species in the universe. The moment the battle changed, back in the battlefield, the Revenant, the last hope of humanity, activated. The lights across the Zalrek fleet dimmed. Power levels fluctuated. Something, invisible but terrifyingly real, pulsed through space. Vorn's heart pounded. He turned to his officers. "What is happening?" One of them, his voice trembling, muttered, "Sir, their ship, it's rewriting physics." And then, the Revenant struck. End of Section 3, Humanity's Desperation. 3,000 characters. This section builds the backstory of humanity's struggle, introduces their last-ditch effort, and hints at the terrifying power of the Revenant, a warship beyond anything the galaxy has seen. Would you like me to continue with Section 4, the arrival of the human warship? You said next. Section 4. ChatGPT said, War, the arrival of the human warship, 4,000 characters. The Zalrek fleet had fought countless battles. They had faced entire civilizations. They had shattered planetary defenses, wiped out space stations, and burned worlds to ash. But never, not once, had they felt what they felt now. For the first time. They felt fear. The Revenant awakens. The Revenant sat motionless in space, its hull absorbing all light around it, a void in the void. It had no markings, no insignia, no fleet designation. It was a ghost. And then, It moved. No thrusters. No energy trails. It just shifted. One moment it was still. The next, it was among them. Right in the middle of the Crimson Spear formation, the Zalrek command deck erupted into chaos. "Admiral!" an officer cried, his voice frantic. "It's inside our formation! We have no time to adjust." Vorn's claws tightened. "How? How did it move without breaking through our perimeter?" No one had an answer, because what they had just witnessed should not have been possible. The Revenant had moved in a way no ship should be able to move, as if it had never obeyed the same laws of reality as the rest of them. The first strike Vorn growled, forcing his fear aside. This was just another trick. One ship, even one with human technology, could not win against the full force of the Dominion. "Fire everything," he ordered. The entire fleet responded. Thousands of warships opened. Fire at once, plasma beams, hyper rail slugs, quantum warheads. A storm of destruction poured down on the Revenant, an attack powerful enough to wipe out a planet. And then, nothing. The Revenant did not move. It did not dodge. It simply let the weapons hit. Except, they didn't. Every shot disappeared before impact. No explosions. No impact. No resistance. It was as if the energy, the missiles, the raw destructive force of the entire Dominion fleet ceased to exist the moment they neared the human warship. The silence before the storm. Deep, heavy silence fell over the battlefield. Inside the Zalrek command deck, no one spoke. No one breathed. Officers stood frozen, their screens displaying a horror they could not understand. What is this?" one officer whispered. Another officer, his voice shaking, barely managed to speak. "It's not fighting back." Vorn stared at the screen, his mind racing. The Revenant hadn't fired a single shot. It had not retaliated. It had not maneuvered. It had not shielded itself. It had simply arrived. And that was enough to break the Dominion's most elite warriors. Vorn refused to accept it. "This changes nothing," he roared. "Prepare for a second wave. Adjust our weapons frequencies. Use warp disruptors. Disable their engines." Then, the lights on his ship flickered, and a single terrifying message appeared on every screen. Words in the human language. Words that sent a chill through every soul in the fleet. "Run." The Revenant finally struck. The wrath of humanity. It started without warning. One of the Dominion's war flagships, one of the strongest warships in the fleet, vanished. No explosion. No energy surge. Just gone. One moment it was there. The next, it no longer existed. Screams erupted across the comm channels. They erased the Relkara. A whole ship. Gone. Vorn felt his blood freeze. He turned his gaze to the screen, desperate for answers. But there were none. The Revenant had not fired a weapon. It had not launched torpedoes. It had simply willed the warship out of existence, and then it did it again. Another warship, one of the Dominion's most advanced battle cruisers, vanished. And another. And another. One by one, ships began to disappear. Not destroyed. Not damaged, just gone. As if the Revenant had decided they no longer belonged in reality. Fear turns to panic. Across the Zalrek fleet, discipline collapsed. Captains screamed at their crews. Officers begged for answers. And then, for the first time in Dominion history, they ran. Ships turned and fled, breaking formation. They no longer cared about victory. They no longer cared about orders. They only cared about survival. Because whatever the Revenant was, whatever power the humans had unlocked, was something no empire, no civilization, no force in the galaxy was ready for. The great and mighty Zalrek Dominion, the most feared force in the known universe, was running, but it was too late. Because the Revenant had only just begun. The Zalrek fleet was in chaos. Their perfect crimson spear formation had crumbled. Their weapons had failed. Their warships were vanishing into nothingness. And the thing that was doing this, the Revenant, was still there, still watching. Admiral. Karak Vorn's mind screamed for logic. This was not how war was fought. Ships were meant to fire weapons. Fleets were meant to battle in open combat. War was supposed to be predictable. But this was slaughter. And the worst part? The humans still hadn't spoken. No threats, no demands, no signs of mercy, just that one message. Run. The last desperate attack, but Vorn was no coward. He had never lost a battle. He had never retreated, and he would not start now. Not against humans. He slammed his fist against the control panel, activating fleet-wide communications. Listen to me. His voice boomed across the Dominion fleet, demanding attention. We do not retreat. We are the Zalrek Dominion, the rulers of this galaxy. He pointed at the thing on the screen. At the center of our fleet is one human ship, just one. And yet we flee like frightened children. He drew in a deep breath. If our weapons fail, we adjust. If our fleet breaks, we reform. If they have new technology, we analyze and adapt. His voice dropped, seething with anger. Now, we crush them. A new strategy formed. The Dominion fleet was still vastly superior in numbers. If they could synchronize their remaining ships, they could execute an omni-barrage, a fleet-wide, unified attack of overwhelming energy. Not even the most advanced shields in the galaxy could withstand that much concentrated firepower. They had used it before, to wipe out planetary defenses. Now they would use it on the Revenant. It had no chance. Vorn's eyes burned with fury. He pointed forward. Fire! The impossible counterattack. The fleet responded instantly. Thousands of warships unleashed their full firepower in one synchronized attack. The omni-barrage lit up the void of space, an explosion of destruction that could have burned a sun out of existence. It surged toward the Revenant, and then it vanished, just like before, just gone, as if the very laws of physics had refused to acknowledge the attack. Silence. Absolute silence. The officers on the command deck stared in horror. Vorn's heart pounded in his chest. This is not possible. Then, finally, the Revenant responded, not with words, not with demands, with destruction. The warship shifted. It did not move like a ship. It did not accelerate. It did not change course. It simply was there. Right in front of the Dominion command ship. Vorn barely had time to react before everything changed. The end begins. The Revenant activated its weapons. Not lasers, not missiles. Something far worse. A pulse of pure black energy rippled out from the warship. Silent, slow-moving, and unstoppable. As it passed over the nearest Dominion warships, something horrifying happened. The ships did not explode. They did not burn. They did not even leave wreckage. They simply ceased to exist. Vorn's breath caught in his throat. Across the fleet, his officers screamed. The Judicator is gone. The Warlants just disappeared. We're losing ships, whole battalions. They watched in absolute horror as more Dominion warships vanished, silently, effortlessly, without resistance. There was no debris. There were no escape pods. It was as if the ships had never existed at all. The Revenant was not firing weapons. It was rewriting reality itself. The panic spreads. Vorn froze. His mind could not comprehend what was happening. This was not war. This was annihilation, a force beyond their understanding, beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. And the Revenant was still there, still watching, still deciding who lived and who vanished. Vorn felt it then, a presence, a cold, distant intelligence, not human, not alien, something more. It was studying them, deciding if they were worth sparing. And deep down, Vorn knew the answer. The Dominion had burned human worlds. They had slaughtered their people. And now it was humanity's turn to strike back. Vorn took a shaky breath. For the first time in his career, he gave the only order that made sense. Retreat. The battle becomes a massacre. For the first time in Dominion history, a retreat order had been given, but it was already too late. The Revenant was not finished. The Zalrek warships turned, their massive engines igniting as they tried to escape. They moved in perfect coordination, their formations breaking apart as ships desperately attempted to flee in all directions. But no matter how fast they moved, they weren't fast enough, because the Revenant did not chase them. It did not need to. It was already everywhere. The massacre begins. Vorn's warships had always been the hunters. They had conquered planets, burned cities, and erased entire species from existence. But now they were the prey. One by one, the Zalrek ships vanished. No explosions, no debris. They were simply erased. Vorn's fleet, the greatest armada in the history of the Dominion, was being reduced to nothing. And it was happening. Without a single shot being fired, across the fleet officers screamed, "This isn't a ship, it's a monster! It's not letting us leave! It's everywhere!" Panic spread like wildfire. Warships collided with each other in their desperate attempt to escape. Some fired at their own engines, hoping to launch themselves away faster. Others begged for mercy over the comms, pleading for surrender. No response. There was never going to be one, because the Revenant was not here for negotiation. It was here for vengeance. The fall of the Dominion's mightiest ship, the Dominion flagship, the Eternal Wrath, was the largest warship ever built. It was a floating city of destruction, over 10 kilometers long, armed with enough firepower to obliterate a planet in a single strike. It had never once been damaged in battle, until today. The Revenant flickered, and suddenly, it was right in front of the Eternal Wrath. Vorn's blood turned to ice. His claws trembled as he whispered, "No, this isn't possible." On the bridge, his officers were in shock. How did it get so close? "It didn't even move. Sir, we can't target it. Our systems won't lock on. I can't see it on sensors. It's just there." Then, the Revenant activated its weapon. A black humming void pulsed from its hull. It spread outward, like a ripple in space itself. The Eternal Wrath did not explode. It did not break apart. Instead, it collapsed in on itself, as if space had decided it no longer belonged there. The largest warship in Dominion history was erased in a heartbeat. No survivors, no escape, just gone. The final desperate plea. Vorn collapsed into his chair. His fleet was dying. His empire was dying. He activated the fleet-wide comms. His voice was not the voice of a warlord anymore. It was the voice of a man begging for his life. "Stop, we surrender. We surrender." The Revenant did not respond. More ships vanished. More screams filled the comms. Vorn clenched his fists, his chest heaving. He had mocked humans. He had thought them weak. And now he was watching the entire might of his fleet be erased by a single ship. The galaxy watches in terror. The battle, if it could even be called that, was being broadcast across the Dominion's entire empire. Billions of Zalrek citizens watched, in horror as their strongest fleet was annihilated. Other empires, those who had once laughed at humanity, stared in silence, because they knew. They knew that if the Revenant could do this to the Zalrek Dominion, then it could do it to anyone. The Revenant speaks. Finally, the Revenant transmitted its final message, a single sentence, broadcast to every ship, every planet, every species in the galaxy. You thought we were weak. A pause. You thought your weapons could stop us. A final, chilling statement. You were wrong. Then, the transmission cut. The Revenant vanished, and just like that, the war was over. The Zalrek Dominion, the most feared empire in the galaxy, was finished. The message to the galaxy. The war was over, but the fear had only just begun. The Zalrek Dominion, once the most powerful empire in the galaxy, was gone. Not conquered, not enslaved, not even left in ruins, erased. An entire fleet, the strongest armada ever assembled, had been wiped from existence. Not by an army, not by a fleet, not even by an empire, by a single human warship. The galaxy reacts. The battle had been broadcasted across the stars. Every major species, every ruling power, every warlord and leader had watched in horror. For centuries, humans had been seen as a nuisance, a species too stubborn to die, but too weak to matter. Now, the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity had never been weak. They had been learning. They had been adapting. And when the time came, when their back was against the wall, when survival was their only choice, they had built something the universe was never meant to see. Something that did not obey the laws of reality. Something that rewrote the rules of war. The Revenant had not just destroyed the Zalrek Dominion, it had rewritten the balance of power in the entire galaxy. A single transmission days. Later a message was received. It came from an unknown location. There was no source, no traceable origin, just a single transmission, broadcasted across every system, every colony, every empire. A warning. And it said, "For centuries, you hunted us, conquered us, burned our worlds. You saw us as nothing more than animals to be exterminated." A pause. "We begged for peace. You answered with war." Another pause. Then, "Now, you will leave us alone." Silence, and then the final words, "Or we will come back." The message ended, and across the stars, in every empire, in every ruling council, in every war room, no one spoke, no one moved, because they all understood the truth. This was not a threat. It was not a demand. It was simply a fact. Humanity had become something else, something unstoppable, something no species in the galaxy could ever afford to challenge again, because they had seen it with their own eyes. You cannot fight what you do not understand. You cannot kill what refuses to die. You cannot stop what defies reality itself. And now, the galaxy would live with that fear. Forever. Epilogue. The Revenant disappears. No one ever saw the Revenant again. It did not return to human space. It did not appear on any radar. It simply vanished. Some believed it had been destroyed. Others believed it was watching from the shadows, waiting. But the truth was simple. The Revenant had done its job. Humanity was safe. And now, the galaxy would never dare to challenge them again.